right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Gage. This is Life Take Two. I know there's a lot of great stuff out there on YouTube. I always appreciate you stopping on one of my videos. As you can see, I'm not alone this evening. I have a guest that I'm really excited to talk to because he's been such a big part of my journey out of MAGA and just such a constant source of inspiration. So today I'm talking with Rich, the founder of Leaving MAGA over at leavingmaga.org, a project created to support people who are walking away from the MAGA movement and trying to rebuild their lives, their values, and their relationships. This isn't a conversation. I just want you to know right off the top about dunking on people who believed something different than what I currently believe. Rich and I are not here to dunk on anybody for having different ideologies. What we're going to talk about tonight is what it actually takes to leave an identity, a tribe, and a worldview. What happens on the other side of that breakup with your political party, which is a huge part of people's communities. Rich, I'm really glad you're here. So thank you so much for being here. I know that my audience is going to absolutely love you and be really excited to see somebody with "I left MAGA" on their hat.
Yeah, here it is.
I have to say that watching the news all the time, it's always nice to like get a text from you, see some of the new people's stories pop up on the website. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. Anyway, I'm really glad that you're out there just doing something that most political spaces don't. You're helping people really dig into authenticity, dig into their own inner voices, and then also get out if they need to. You're not just arguing with them. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. And I just want to start by saying thank you for everything that you do. And will you tell my audience just exactly who you are and where they can find you?
Sure. And thank you, Jenny, for having me. I want to say also that I am always inspired watching your videos. And I was
Uh,
just rereading your story again. That's at our website, and it means a lot for you to be associated with our organization. I have a memoir coming out, so I've gotten used to speaking a little bit about myself. I'm someone who came from a very traditional middle class background. The oldest of four, I had two parents who worked a variety of public and private sector jobs. And in 2015 and in 16, I felt very politically lonely. I felt that democracy had been failing people. And my belief was that the best way to save democracy was to destroy it. And that's what set me on a pathway to becoming a MAGA activist.
Rich, can
And
I
I'm
ask how old you were? Like, you don't have to tell us exactly, but were you like in your 20s, 30s, 40s? I'm not sure how old you are today.
Sure. So I just recently turned 49. So I'm going to enjoy my last year of my 40s. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to what I hope is going to be a very banner year for our organization. I founded Leaving MAGA because I believe that there are others out there, just like yourself, who were deep in the MAGA community at one time and for a variety of reasons decided to leave. They went through their own transformation and had their own epiphany and decided to leave because they realized that MAGA was not a part of their identity that any longer could comport with their own values. So when I founded the organization, I knew there had to be others out there. And thankfully, with this being our third year, we're now meeting people who have left, who are telling their stories with us, people who are 2024 Trump voters who are now
Wow.
coming forward. And we're also in touch with people who are currently MAGA supporters at the moment, and they're having doubts and they're confused and they're questioning their belief system. So I'm really proud of what we've done. We have had success, Jenny, because of people like yourself and our team. And I expect that this year we're going to continue to be busier than ever. Right now, I'm happy to report we've never been more active, and I think that's only going to pick up.
Yes. And Rich, I just have to say, you were successful because of everything that you do. You're the bedrock of an organization that I think provides just a safe landing space for people coming out of a community that is a really big deal to come out of. So, kudos to yourself. I just want to acknowledge all of the work that you do. So, you were having this disillusionment with politics and feeling like it just all needed to be burned to the ground. And at that time, you were a Trump voter. You were how deep into MAGA? Ankle deep, knee deep, nose deep? How deep were you into the whole Trump train?
Yeah, I was right to the top of my scalp as somebody who was that deep into the community. After the 2016 election, it was not a case of see you in 4 years and we'll be back. After the election, I felt vindicated. I felt validated. I became a podcaster. I paid for my own production. I was writing for a number of MAGA friendly media outlets. I had bylines in places like Fox and The Federalist and American Greatness, American Thinker, very, very right wing MAGA media. I was a speaker at Trump groups. I was a sponsor of Trump groups. I donated to Trump groups. I worked on the campaign for Trump in 16 and 20. I worked on the Ron DeSantis campaign as a volunteer in 2018. There was no mistaking my MAGA activism. And I was very unapologetically public in my support for Trump because I believe that MAGA was very future facing. I didn't see it as nostalgic. I actually viewed it as very forward facing and progressive. It's delusional for me to hear myself say it now, but when Trump won, I thought of it as a second founding of America.
I felt like that too. Like he was like a new era for me. Like he was going to bring in not even just a return to the past, but the golden age. I was obviously born in the early 70s. And so I didn't live through JFK, but we really have like the 1950s and 60s romanticized in our era, right? So to me, it's like, oh, this is that whole like return to Camelot type of thing. We are going to enter this whole new world of American greatness in ways that we've never seen before. So I certainly felt that too. I totally get what you're saying. One thing that's really coming to mind here is as you talk about your past MAGA self, I know that we see people on the news. We have friends, neighbors, maybe even like our spouses and people close to us that if you're a Democrat or any type of a moderate voter here in America, we think those people are never going to change, right? Like the, the hardcore MAGA
Right.
people. But Rich, here you are, and you're no longer wearing the MAGA hat. You're wearing the I left MAGA hat. I have to say, too, and tell me if you think that this feels true to you. Those of us who are in really, really, really deep, however deep you were, that's how much you bounce out. So if someone maybe didn't even vote that much, they just sort of liked Trump, but they weren't really that involved in politics, didn't feel like it impacted them that much, they're not very likely to start a podcast or a website or an entire movement against that group, right? But for me, being a Mormon trad wife and also being very outspoken and very vocal about my political beliefs, my religious beliefs, the traditional American family, etc., because I was so deep, like just like you, I love that. I was up to my scalp deep. When I left, obviously, I have my platform and I'm fighting this so hard because I was in so deep and I know exactly what's behind the curtains of MAGA that other people don't. So, would you say that that rings true to you? That those people like yourself, like you were like bylines on Fox News and really supportive of Trump and deeply involved, where it wasn't just a passive thing for you, that was a big part of your life. And now here you are fighting against it.
I like to paraphrase the late Venerable Ernest Hemingway in saying that my epiphany happened gradually and then suddenly all at once. And our experience is that for our leaders who also left, they underwent a similar road to Damascus moment, like in the Bible when the scales fall from Saul's eyes. For me, MAGA was my being and my identity and my personhood. It was my worldview. It was what gave me a community. It's what provided for me a second family. My MAGA second family, as embarrassed as I am to admit this, oftentimes took precedence over my own blood family. And I neglected my duties as a parent and as a husband sometimes because of my MAGA activism. So there's, looking back on it in hindsight, I never imagined not being MAGA when I was in MAGA, even though there might have been times when Trump might have said something that gave me pause, or when he made the comment at Charlottesville about very fine people. I criticized him privately. I didn't do it publicly. But there was never a time until I started to have my doubts, really in the summer of 2021, that I ever imagined myself not being MAGA. It was as much a part of my identity as anything else in my life. And looking back on it, Jenny, it was really a very traumatic way of living, because
How so? Tell me about that.
I came to realize and understand that being in MAGA, you're in these perpetual states of feeling afraid and paranoid and rageful and despair and hopelessness and even all or none nihilism. I remember one of the motivations for me in supporting Trump and MAGA was that I felt that if Hillary and the Democrats won, that they would never lose another election again, and that they would seize power indefinitely. And now, like, to hear myself say that, and in the same conversation to say that I'm not, that old saying, I'm not a member of any organized party, I'm a Democrat. That's as delusional as it is. That's what I actually thought. So I was so driven by these feelings of being afraid
You're
and
always fighting against something, right?
always an enemy. Us
Mhm,
versus them is what gives the adrenaline rush. It's what gives the dopamine addiction to the next, whatever it is that we're going to be next outraged over. And
mhm.
I was always angry and rageful toward people I thought were existential threats to my life, my livelihood, my family, and my country. And that's what I thought about Democrats, liberals, progressives. It's also, Jenny, what I thought about anyone who may have been a Republican or a conservative who was against MAGA. If
Mhm.
somebody was not 100% with us, they were 100% against us. And that way of thinking, all it does is it just
Separates.
it creates a division that is is really inexplicable unless someone has really lived it. And the fact that we've lived it, we know what it's like to divide others from each other. I remember when I wrote a mea culpa and I left MAGA and saying that I was sorry for it, I had all these people come to me talking about their relationships. And I was very naive and oblivious to how many friendships and families and communities and places of worship had been torn asunder as a result of this movement. And I had to have a reckoning that I had a hand in that I was culpable and complicit in helping the president divide the country.
Wow. Rich, when you look back at it now, does it seem kind of preposterous that you personally felt that weight on your shoulders, like it was up to you? So there's all these enemies out there, the liberals and the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. It's funny that the 2016 election, like I had this feeling as a Mormon girl too, who it's, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so the end times. I had this feeling that if Hillary Clinton were to win, that not only would the Democrats take over for the rest of forever, but that Armageddon would come. It was going to
Mhm.
usher in the apocalypse. All these horrible things were going to happen just because in my head Democrats were the party of Satan. So so like I was afraid of that too, and I had this savior complex that to me had been, I guess, programmed through growing up Mormon, right? Because you really are. We're going to bring the world his truth. We're going to be the light shining on the hill. And I had this savior complex, and everything that you're talking about having that enemy out there. Every cult has to have an enemy. It keeps all of the followers like linked arms together so that they can keep the enemy out, and also keeps you acting to keep the enemy out. You're going to donate your money. You're going to donate your time. You're going to fight for survival. It plays on that survival instinct. And those two, that surviving and fighting that outward enemy to me translated into that savior complex and overdrive, where I always felt like if I posted to my Facebook about traditional family, if I gave Book of Mormons to my neighbors, if I made sure that I helped get people out to vote and things like that, that I was going to change the world. I had a part in preventing that apocalypse should Hillary Clinton be elected, you know? Does it seem preposterous to you now to look back and think that you thought that you were so important that you could actually change the future of the world just by supporting Donald Trump and being part of MAGA?
Not exactly, Jenny, in the way you lived it and experienced it, but there was an apocalypticism for me about this, and keep in mind that I felt that way being on the winning side, right? We won in 2016, and yet
Mhm.
it wasn't really about optimism and joy. Those emotions were there when we won. Sometimes they would appear on a day-to-day basis, but they tended to be fleeting because we were always in a fight or flight mode, and it was always crush or be crushed. Our philosophy about our political opponents was we needed to conquer them before they conquered us. And to sound so militaristic about it, it is, as you put it, preposterous to think that I had so much influence that I had convinced myself into believing that I was part of this political army and this nationalist soldier fighting a good and evil battle. It, there's I think this is something that the right wing does really well is it creates this Manichaean tension of light versus darkness. I was part of the light and you were part of the light when you were in it, and we felt we needed to challenge and defeat the darkness. It wasn't enough to just win. We had to win and gain power. I remember when being in MAGA, I remember how it was a fantasy of ours to kill off the GOP and transform it into a MAGA party.
Mhm.
And that has been accomplished. That's been achieved. So even though I was a Republican under Trump, I had never been a Democrat or a Republican before Trump. I had been an independent, and and I'm back to being an independent today. But with Trump with him in office, yes, I was a Republican, but there's no love lost between MAGA and the Republican Party. And this idea that I had so much sway over the outcome, I really deluded myself into believing that.
To the point that it takes up a lot of your life. Like, you wake
Absolutely.
up thinking about that battle that you're fighting, and there's always a new battle to fight, right? So you are up to your scalp in MAGA, heavily invested in it, and then 2021 comes along. What and I love that Ernest Hemingway quote, but for me, I know that there was one singular moment where maybe it wasn't earth-shattering, but I knew in that moment that something inside me had shifted and that I could never go back. What was that moment for you when you personally realized that you could no longer be part of MAGA? And I guess the bigger picture, not just politically, but personally, psychologically, communally. What was that moment for you when you finally had those thoughts in your head that I've shifted? I'm no longer MAGA.
If people recall, in the summer of 2021, there was the Delta surge of COVID,
I
and
almost
kids.
died from it. I was hospitalized for months and then I got blood clots. So I'm lucky to be alive today. I got that Delta strain and almost didn't survive.
And if we remember, Jenny, there were kids getting sick from it, and kids were being hospitalized. There were reports of children dying from that strain. And my governor, Ron DeSantis, when this was happening, platformed COVID anti-vaxxers at his press conference. And when that happened, it really shocked me and it confused me and it created a crack. And after that crack formed, I decided to do something that sounds very simple, but it was very profoundly life-changing and altering for me, which was I diversified my news and information sources.
Mm.
And when I did that, I came to better understand January 6th and what had happened. I didn't support what happened that day, but I thought that it was hyperbolized into a bigger deal than it really was. I also did not believe that the election had been stolen. But those were not January 6th and the stolen election lies were not enough for me to leave. When Ron DeSantis did that, it it was like I ran face first into a brick wall, and I started to expand my news and information sources and started to realize that a lot of what I was believing was not true.
This is a really important moment here because I do want to point out that you could easily have just turned off the TV. You could have still just, stayed true to your ideology and numbed out over that, right? Doubt your doubts is a phrase that the Mormon prophets have used. If you ever have that moment where you see a crack, you're not supposed to doubt the crack. You're supposed to doubt your doubts. So you could easily have done that. You could have easily just stayed in that echo chamber and you didn't. So when you say that you diversified your information and your news, I only ever watched Fox News my entire life. Glenn Beck, he was LDS, so he was like the Lord's political commentator. I loved Rush Limbaugh. I'm just this Mormon stay-at-home mommy. I would have Fox News on all the time. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd turn it on, I'd just keep it on in the background all the time. That was my only source of information. There were maybe a couple of times when I'd be at a friend's house and they'd have like CNN or something, and I would feel so enraged listening to the lies on CNN. I couldn't even listen to like just our national news because to me, I didn't feel like they had faith in the Lord. I didn't feel like they saw the truth of what America was. And like, I thought they were delusional, I guess is a simple way of saying it. So Fox News was my everything. And for me, during the pandemic, I was so sick. I had to go cold turkey off of really everything. I was too sick to watch TV. And then I joined this challenge with a friend where we were supposed to not listen to the news at all. I think it was like a total like non-electronics type of thing for 60 days. And it was one of the first times in my life that I just didn't have that input. And Rich, I didn't miss it. Like, getting Fox News out of my life was like life changing. It was so peaceful. I wasn't mad at anybody anymore.
Well, Fox was part of my right-wing media diet. I would say the site that I frequented the most was Breitbart. I lived on that site. I lived in the comments section of Breitbart. And I also consumed the media I wrote for, the Federalist. I wrote for a site called WorldNet Daily, WND.com, which is the site that originated the Obama birther conspiracy.
Oh.
And I knew that, Jenny, and I knew that, but I overlooked that fact because it was more important for me to get my work out there in the public realm as an activist. So I ignored. I knew the fact that they had originated that conspiracy, but I overlooked it because that was secondary
Because you
to
believed.
I was a true believer. It was secondary to the importance of me being that activist. And, I became a parent for the first time in the summer of 2016 and again in the winter of 2019.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I remember on one hand, I'd have my kid, my baby, and on the other hand, using my phone to write an article. I never took an hour off from MAGA. People will say, did you take a day off from it? I never took an hour off. And I know how that will sound to people, that they'll say that it sounds like a cult and it sounds so, and I agree that there were some cult-like aspects to being in MAGA. I tend to avoid the cult language only because I want to give people an out and an exit ramp to extract them out of MAGA and not give them a reason to stay there and dig their heels in deeper. But there's no doubt that the obsessiveness of being in MAGA was all consuming for me.
And yet Joe DeSantis slams on the COVID vaxxers. You have this crack and boom, there you are on the other side. So tell me about that process.
So I call it my year of heaven and hell because I went from, staunch MAGA activist to now I'm a doubting Rich when Ron DeSantis decides to do what he does. And then of course claims that he never actually heard the conspiracy theories from his own press conference, which I knew was a lie. I knew that he wasn't telling the truth. So I went through an entire year of this year of heaven and hell, vacillating between being in MAGA and being out of MAGA. I would listen to Trump, for example, talk about the stolen election lies. And I knew that he was traumatizing his supporters by trying to convince them that they'd been disenfranchised. I knew it was a lie. But then I would look at a photograph from an event at Mar-a-Lago that I went to, and I would think, no, I was doubting the doubts, as you put it. And I went through this process for an entire year of just me and myself and my thoughts and solitude at night, every single night.
I want to point out too, having been there myself, and I deconstructed Mormonism, Christianity, MAGA, Trump, my ex-husband got divorced after 24 years, everything, right? Even like sexual orientation, everything, right? I had to deconstruct it all. I will say right here, I just want to add for anyone who's listening who maybe is questioning, it seems like in this era, you would just kind of try to be neutral, right? Like, I'm going to put the gear into neutral. I'm just going to not think about it. But it's interesting when your whole identity is based on something and you're an action focused person to begin with, you're out there being an activist, that it is agony to just cruise into neutral. You have to, like, you're constantly thinking, well, is there a God or isn't there a God? Well, is MAGA the party? Is Donald Trump the guy, or is he not? And it's Joe Biden. It's really difficult to just pull yourself into a space of not thinking about anything. But for me, finally being able to just like not think about it, like put everything on the shelf. I'm not going to think about my party affiliation. I'm not going to nitpick the Bible anymore or the Book of Mormon or anything. I'm just going to go live my life and breathe. That space is actually what then helped me to get to the other side. But it is really agonizing, right? You can't just not think about it.
It isn't a case of, well, Trump's saying this and I disagree with it and I'm out. That might be applicable for someone who, like you had mentioned at the outset, is maybe more of a partisan Trump voter, doesn't pay attention to politics, maybe supported Trump because they thought he was the better of the two options, whatever the justification. When you're so deeply invested in a community like I was with MAGA, it isn't so easy to just disagree and then leave, because there is a deconstruction process that occurs, which for me was an entire year. And Jenny, my final accelerant was actually May 24th, 2022, which was the day of the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. After that day, that's when I left MAGA.
Why? What happened? Like, what happened?
I came to this realization. It was painful. It was liberating, but it was painful for me to have to conclude that the Republican Party deemed acceptable avoidable deaths and suffering, including those of children. And it was applicable for COVID with the anti-vaccine sentiments, applicable when it came to January 6th, the fact that law enforcement was attacked, law enforcement people committed suicide as a
Wait, I
result.
watched some of the videos that I hadn't seen before of the January 6th. I've
Mhm.
been just watching as much as I could here over the past couple of weeks while I was sick. And like I saw a lot of it, I thought, but those people were out to cause widespread harm.
That's right.
It wasn't just a protest. They weren't protesting. And I think that there's a big difference. And watching that myself, now I did not vote for Trump in 2020. So I sat that election out. We were on our way to the polls and I was kind of questioning, right? I'd already left the Mormon church, left all this stuff. I was kind of questioning. I was not at all in support of January 6th, but I had thought for so many years that it was just a protest that went a little sideways, right? Like they got there in the heat of the moment, they went bonkers. That's not the case at all. These people planned on harming other people. They planned on attacking the police. They planned on attacking security.
Well, I thought about January 6th when it first happened. I wasn't in support of it, but I'm embarrassed to say that what bothered me about January 6th initially was not the violence, it was not the rioters, it was not law enforcement having violence committed against them. What bothered me about that day was I looked at all of those people at the insurrectionists. I thought they are harming our chances of a 2024 comeback. So I was worried about the brand.
Hmm.
I was concerned about damage control. I knew about QAnon and Proud Boys, but I thought these were just hobbyist groups that had no influence whatsoever. After I started diversifying my news and information sources, I came to better understand January 6th. And I realized, you know what? It was a coordinated attack. It was an attempt by the president to overturn a free and fair election. And the people who committed violence had the blessing of the most powerful person in the history of the world. And I
Mhm.
was naive to all of that when January 6th first happened because I was still in my right wing MAGA media echo chamber.
Rich, not to take the responsibility away from you, but in our day and age, it's really hard to know the truth of things. Washington, D.C. is thousands of miles away from me. We're relying on our news sources to show us a little 5-minute segment here and then narrate for us what went on. But I wasn't there up close and personal. I didn't know anyone who was part of January 6th. It can be really difficult for us to get to the bottom of things. And that's where the way that the media presents things, in my opinion, is one of the greatest dividers of our country today. The news has stopped just being people reporting on the happenings. They are selling a very specific ideology for those clicks so that their audience knows to follow them. They want to keep them a little bit enraged all the time. And because of that, you can listen to, 10 different news segments on January 6th, for instance, and hear a bunch of different slants of what happened, a bunch of different spins, and still not really know what happened.
I think the media as a whole, what we might call mainstream media or legacy media, I don't think, Jenny, that they've really recovered from 2016 and getting it wrong so badly with Hillary losing and Trump winning. I had this phrase that I had trademarked, which I called the Democrat media industrial complex. I did that when I was in MAGA because I believed in the liberal media conspiracy. And when
Which
I start,
is because Trump
yeah,
talks about this all the time. I just
which
saw a
is
White House thing the other day where he's like, "Oh, this is a fake news. I'm not going to answer you." So
the liberal media conspiracy. It's another concocted tool of fear. It was
trust that information.
right because it's fake news. It's a failing media outlet. Whatever the president says, I went along with when I was in MAGA. It's why I didn't read regularly New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, these types of publications, which I turned to after I started to step out of the right wing media echo chamber. And I started to realize, Democrats actually aren't coming for our guns. And public schools are not indoctrinating children into transgender Marxism. And liberals are not trying to import brown people to replace white people. These kinds of ideas were gospel in MAGA,
Absolutely.
and I believed a lot of them. And then all of a sudden, after Ron DeSantis and all of that happens, and I'm reading all these different sources, it's starting to challenge my pervasively held beliefs and these beliefs that permeated all across the MAGA community. And I had to eventually come to this realization that what I believed were lies and falsehoods and conspiracies, and that I had amplified them. And it was really painful, Jenny, for me to take stock of that because I always prided myself on facts and prided myself on being objective. Well, I was anything but when I was in MAGA. It was in the process of leaving that I became more of an objective observer who decided to take more time to try to determine, as you put it, what was true and what was false.
Do you believe that there is a pathway for helping other people who are just like you were up to their scalps in MAGA Do you think there's a pathway for their loved ones, friends, coworkers to, I guess, help stimulate that process of the critical thinking, looking for more like balanced news information, trying to get to the bottom of things, understanding truth? Is there a pathway for helping people have that wake up moment that you had?
Every Tuesday night, Leaving MAGA hosts online support groups for friends and family of those who are MAGA identified. And something that we talk about in the support groups is that we're not able to change someone else. The only person who changes is that individual. But what we can do is we can let our MAGA identified friends and family know that if there ever comes a point when they're questioning their belief system, when something is not sitting right with them about what's happening in the country, if they reach a red line, if there's one lie too many, if there's one betrayal too many, that friends and family can be there as a friendly ear for the person in MAGA. And if that person in MAGA knows that, and they know that they can confide in a relative or a friend without being judged, without being ostracized, free from recriminations, then it opens up a pathway for people as part of a transformative experience. It opens up that pathway where people in MAGA who are starting to who are undergoing a crisis of conscience, they can turn to their close ones. And their close ones, I hope, will learn about what we're doing at Leaving MAGA and introduce them to all of the leaders who have left, to show, like yourself, Jenny, to show that it is possible to change. And I think that anyone who genuinely changes, who seeks sincere penitence, I believe that they are deserving of grace if they take responsibility for their past words, deeds, and rhetoric. Because
Mhm,
to truly leave MAGA, one must take accountability for their past, because MAGA has caused great harm. And if someone has supported it, then they have done their part in causing that harm. But because we want people to feel that they have an exit ramp, that's why we created with Leaving MAGA a new community. So we're
mhm.
that new place for them to go to where they can go through a deconstruction, they can go through a process by which they make amends for whatever they may have said or done in the past. And it's a way for them to align themselves with our organization, which is dedicated to love and fairness and justice and truth. And we are not partisan. We have no ideological purity test. The only non negotiable mandate we have is people must take responsibility for their past in order to truly leave MAGA.
I think that that's probably what motivates me in everything that I do, right? I mean, for me, that accountability thing, I was born into this community, not MAGA, Trump wasn't around yet, but I was born into the alt-right, white supremacist, prepping, militarized religious community. And so I didn't have a choice in it. And for people like me, I was victimized by this ideology just as much as I harmed people with it. So it's been really important for me to acknowledge the parts where I didn't feel like I was acting authentically. Of course, being indoctrinated in a cult from birth, I didn't necessarily have critical thinking skills. I didn't have a different way of seeing the world. As I was being taught the sky is blue and the grass is green, and here's the alphabet, I was also being taught that Black people were Black because they had a curse. I was
Mhm.
being taught that the indigenous populations were the scourge of the earth. That's actually like a quote from the Book of Mormon. So I didn't have an abject reality to begin with, but there were moments in my life when that inner voice of mine was telling me that, for instance, when I was fighting against Prop 8 in California, at that point, I had met a couple of real life lesbians, right? It's really easy to demonize somebody when you know that they're never gonna meet them. But I had been raised my whole entire life that LGBTQ is, the sin next to murder. And then I made friends with a checker at Trader Joe's who was a lesbian. And then I made a couple other lesbian friends, and they were the nicest people. They were so kind. And yet I still fought Prop 8. And there were times when my lesbian friend at Trader Joe's would ask me how I felt about Prop 8 because she knew that I was Mormon. I was having a new baby every year going through her checkout line. She knew that I was Mormon. We lived in Mesa, Arizona. And I would have this inner voice telling me that I should just drop the whole thing. Prop 8 had nothing to do with me. I didn't even live in California, and I loved this person, and all I wanted to do was be friends with her. But I would override that instinct of mine, my whole entire authentic self crying out that, don't do this, and spew hate.
Right.
I'm sorry, Ren, but homosexuality is a sin. And yes, I'm putting time and money into fighting Prop 8 because I'm sorry, marriage is between man and a woman. And for me, those are the moments that I sincerely feel like I have to acknowledge and I have to own. I certainly did not choose to be born into that community, that ideology, that religion. But there were moments along the way when I chose to override my own gut and my own heart and be just a truly hateful, despicable person. And it has been so important to my own healing journey to dig into those moments. And if the people are still around, for me to apologize. There are people who've passed away that I can never, ever go back and say, one of my grandmothers, she wasn't Mormon. I can never go back and apologize to my grandma for hating her because she hadn't accepted Jesus the way that she was supposed to. But I certainly think that that's an important healing step for absolutely everybody. Just acknowledging, though, that some of the stuff, it wasn't your fault. There was somebody else who was pushing you into that. But those moments where you had that choice. And then for some people, it is that action. For you now, you've started leaving MAGA. For me, I have my platforms and I have real life outreach outside of the internet too, where I'm doing everything that I can to fight against MAGA. And I cannot go back in time and erase the harm that I did back then. It's over. The rearview mirror is ripped off, thrown out the window. But I can certainly learn from my past and make changes in the future. I can never make up for any of the harm that I did in the past, but maybe kind of balance it out.
All of us have agency, and I don't defend my or anyone else's ignorance. But to your point on this, Jenny, it's also true that all of us are susceptible to being influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's why childhood indoctrination should just be point blank illegal. I don't think that children should be indoctrinated into religion at all until age 18.
And that goes to show how your youth and inexperience was manipulated and exploited. And you were inculcated into a way of thinking and being that you really had no way of knowing was wrong because of your age. And I think with people in MAGA, what happens is that people in MAGA have genuine, real, valid concerns and fears.
Mm-hmm.
We care about economic opportunity. We want safe and secure country. We want good schools for our kids. We want affordable health care. We want all of these.
I was MAGA because of my kids. I felt like Donald Trump was going to protect their futures in ways that nobody else was. Like everything that I did in MAGA was out of just absolute love and protectiveness for my kids, for my marriage, for my friends, my parents, all those people that I loved. I felt like MAGA was Donald Trump and everything. I felt like they were the way to protect everyone that I loved.
Yeah, being a parent, I remember looking at my firstborn in very early 2017 when she was only 4 or 5 months old. And I said to her, I said, we did this for you. We won this election for you. And I was thinking about it that way. So I was motivated to do MAGA activism because of my kids. But ironically, I was also motivated to leave MAGA because of children. I remember when kids were
Hmm.
getting sick with COVID, and I would read these stories about parents being with their kids in ICUs, I remember thinking, and I was heartbroken over just imagining what these parents were going through. And I thought, what if that were my wife and I? What if it was one of our kids who got sick and our leaders are talking about conspiracy theories when they should be working to better protect the people they're elected to serve. So it was such a moment for me to go through that gradual and then sudden epiphany where I realized that this party that I had supported, this movement, said that avoidable deaths and suffering were okay and were acceptable, and said that politically motivated violence was okay. And I realized, no, it's not okay. I stood by for too long and justified the unjustifiable, and I couldn't do it any longer. MAGA is an extremist group because it encourages its adherents to dehumanize and vilify those with whom we disagree. And when I finally left, the official date of my departure of MAGA was August 30th of 2022. I wrote a mea culpa, and in this article I published, I said that I was sorry for supporting Trump, that I wanted to apologize to anyone I may have hurt with my words, deeds, and rhetoric.
Where
And
can we
Jenny,
find that? Can we put that link in the description for?
sure,
Okay.
I can get it for you. It was published in a place called Occupy Democrats. And the God's honest truth is, I never actually thought that anyone would care. I really didn't. I thought that I would write it for my own catharsis. I would close that chapter of my life and I would move on. But what happened was, instantaneously, I had friends and family messaging me online saying, Rich, can you talk to my mother and my brother? Or can you talk to my parents? Can you talk to my best friend? I was completely oblivious to how many relationships had been adversely affected because of this movement. I was, Jenny, naive to all of that, and I couldn't any longer ignore the fact that I had played a hand in that division.
I think you said something really important there where you talked about doing it for your kids. You didn't let go of that goal of protecting your kids and providing a good future for them and making sure that you were doing all you could, that the world had a good future for your kids. You just changed the vehicle that got you to that final destination. That was a huge aha moment for me. I still want to be connected in my community. I still want to do everything that I can to live a life of value and purpose and integrity. But for me, MAGA was that vehicle. I was cruising down the road, and I guess it would be a bright red Chevy pickup truck, right? With the mud flaps and everything. Like that was my vehicle to get to those things. So I didn't let go of that. I didn't let go of wanting to live a life of integrity and values and create a good future for my kids. I just switched to a different car. That's it. You let go of MAGA, but we don't let go of those objectives and those desires for the things that we're doing. And I think that that's one of the most challenging things of all, is to realize, oh, this thing I've invested so much in that I thought was going to get me to where I want to go isn't going to get me there. It's hard, but you are still focused on that goal and you're doing it in a very different way. I wonder how much of that MAGA loyalty for the people that you hear from, because you hear from so many people, how much of that do you think is about politics? And how much of that do you think is actually about belonging and identity and objective?
Much more the latter than politics or ideology. Something that I say in my public talks about people in MAGA is, instead of asking what's wrong with someone, we ask what happened to that person. I think for many in MAGA, they, for whatever reason or reasons, have endured loneliness, maybe economic trauma, and it made them vulnerable to the very simple black and white, easy to fix problem solving that
Fight the
MAGA
enemy.
and Donald Trump presented. Exactly. That there are pernicious
Fight, fight,
forces.
fight. He stands up from that attempted
That's right.
assassination. Fight, fight, fight. That's a simple answer. That's the easy button. If we just fight, 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 then America's going to turn great again.
And I think that for a lot of people who are in MAGA, they did endure trauma that made them understandably suspicious of government and of the two parties like I was. I thought the two parties were the same. That was my belief when Trump came on the scene. And I remember thinking, okay, he might be running as a Republican, but he's really a true outsider. Doesn't come from the world of government, military, doesn't come from the world of Washington, D.C. politics. It was very much an appeal to me. It was it was one of the reasons I gravitated to the campaign the way that I did.
Because
And
politicians are all corrupt. And
that's
so then
right,
we have
crooked
this
and corrupt.
outsider. They're crooked and corrupt. And so he was very appealing to me for that same reason. He was a businessman. And in the Mormon community, success, it's a prosperity gospel. So that businessman, I thought, he's not going to have those same ideologies as a politician. Would you ever vote for a non-politician again?
I won't say that I wouldn't, but
Would you be as inclined to vote for somebody who doesn't understand the Constitution and maybe some law and some political science again?
I think the threshold is very, very, very high for someone to meet who's never actually been in government and doesn't have some experience as a public servant. I think there's a mythology that someone who's successful in business will be successful as a president or someone who's in government. And I think that Trump shows that that's not necessarily true.
It was a
Being a
good
president,
theory.
it sounds great on paper.
It does.
It sounds very logical. We need to run the country as a business. I thought that way. There were fellow Trump voters I knew who thought that way as well.
It was the best thing since sliced bread. Like, why haven't we thought of this before? We need to have more businessmen run for office. And after 2016, I don't know anything about politics. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I just had this feeling that Trump had made America really great. So I felt like the proof was in the pudding. He had made America better than it had ever been before. Nothing to base that off of, just seemed like it.
I didn't think of Make America Great Again with any kind of nostalgia because of my age. I was only 39 at the time in 2016. But I do remember thinking that finally we had someone in office who was willing to obliterate the established political order. Like
Mhm.
that's what I wanted. I
Drain the
felt like
swamp.
let's just tear it all down. And then I realized after leaving MAGA that it's much easier to tear something down than it is to build it up. And that's what we're seeing the president do right now, creating crises, dismantling institutions, and consolidating power. That's what he's doing right now. There isn't a draining of the swamp. There
Well, he is
isn't
the swamp.
He is. There is exactly. There is no strengthening of democracy. There is no fight for the middle class. He is the swamp. And I think, Jenny, that many people in MAGA are starting to see that. But it's very scary to go against everything that they've been for the last many, many years. For some people, it's 5, 8, 10, maybe longer than that years since Trump came on the scene. Now 11 years later, for some people, the idea that maybe MAGA is not actually what they thought it was has got to be petrifying for a lot of people because it's what their identity is. It's what their entire personhood is based on. We have to make it okay for people to say, "Hey, I don't support this anymore, and I think I was wrong, and I erred in my ways, and we need to create a welcoming, hospitable environment for people who come to their own realization that MAGA is not something that they want to support anymore."
So I have a question for you on that, which is really like on the topic of shame and pride, those human instincts that we have that kind of play against each other. How do you help people? And then how would others help people leave without humiliating them or making them feel stupid for who they used to be?
I think that we have to be empathetic to others and recognize that, just like you were saying earlier, that even though we don't defend anyone's ignorance, a lot of the MAGA mindset comes from a very disciplined right-wing messaging machine. And I fell prey to that. And you did as well, and there are
Mhm.
millions of others
It's
who
very
fell prey.
alluring.
It absolutely is, and it's effective, and it's in the way that it gets its hooks into us and gets us thinking about that it conjures many of the grievances that we might feel. So I think to give people an out without shaming them, that's why friends and family, Jenny, are so important to us as allies,
Mhm.
because they're the ones who can set the stage and create the pathway for those in MAGA to leave, to walk away without feeling shamed or feeling judged or censured as a result of their past decisions. Because if someone feels that they're going to be on the receiving end of shame, even if they know that they should leave, they're probably not going to.
So I feel that personally, and I left MAGA 2 years ago. So 7 years ago, I left the Mormon church. 2 weeks later, my 24-year marriage ended. I left Christianity and MAGA at the same time, which was actually, it's 2.5 years now. It was when the first little bit of the campaign cycle started up again prior to the 2024 election. And I just realized I deconstructed so much about my, racism and hatred for other people that I could no longer align with Donald Trump. I started watching just a little bit of some rallies and stuff on TV. And for me, it was just this moment of, I'm not that person anymore. Like, that's not at all who I am. So it's funny, I saw a little video. I was just like, well, I think that I'm probably a Democrat. And I got online and I just Googled, like, what do Democrats stand for? What do they typically vote for? And what do Republicans stand for? And I took out a notepad and I made a list and I was like, oh, I'm a Democrat. I'm not even Republican. So it's just kind of as simple as that. And then there was a town hall meeting with Cory Booker, Gabby Giffords, and Mark Kelly. And the funny thing is, I asked my honey to go with me and I filmed it. And I was like, I don't know why I'm filming this because nobody cares that I used to be a Trump girl like a week ago. I just re registered as a Democrat and now I'm going to this Democratic town hall. But Rich, it was so funny when I went into that town hall, I truly had like these deep emotional reactions to the fact that I was walking into the Democrats because my whole entire life, those were the followers of Satan, the sons of perdition. Those were the evildoers. Those were the baby killers. Those were, the liberals and the gay people and all that stuff, the feminists, the feminazis, Rush Limbaugh used to call them. I felt really conflicted walking into this group. It was this huge town hall. Everybody was out to see Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly. We love them here in Arizona. And I filmed it. And it was such a beautiful 2 hours. Sitting in that town hall that night, I realized, oh, these are my people. And just the compare and contrast from some of the Trump stuff that I've been to, which is like you say, like all the enemies and fight against this and fight against that. It was so just loving and supportive and tolerant of everybody. There was no enemy. We never talked about an enemy. It was what issues need to be addressed. What do you guys want us to hear? What can we take back to Washington with this? And so much compassion and respect for other people. So I walk away from that. I do a little video about it. I post it to my YouTube. I didn't think anyone would care that I had left MAGA. And the next morning I woke up and that had blown up. And I mean, of course, I had almost 500,000 followers already in my platforms, but I've never talked about politics. I didn't think anybody cared about politics. And that just absolutely like went crazy. But one of the things that shuts me down the most is when I post a video talking about my old MAGA life, which again wasn't a choice for me. And people like basically tell me, I hope you rot in hell, Jenny. Like I
Right.
actually get comments from people that are like, you caused this. This is all your fault. I've had comments the past couple weeks after Minnesota, just, there are people who have died. These kids don't have a mom. Renee Good was killed because you voted for Donald Trump. And it shuts me down on such a deep level that there are days that I literally I'll read through the comments, I'll read some of those comments, I'll have people email me, I'll have people do videos, stitching my videos saying, well, this girl caused these problems. and I'll turn off my computer and I'll tell Kevin, I'm never doing another video. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't care. We're moving to Ireland or Mexico, depending on the week. And I'm done. Because when you just rub somebody's nose in something that they didn't have control over to begin with, that they were doing because they truly love their family, love their communities, love America, and they thought that that was the vehicle that was going to ensure the safety and happy future of all those things. When you just rub somebody's nose in it and beat them with the paper, um, it doesn't help, right?
Well, I think that if we're going to get through the moment that we're in right now in our country, it's going to require unlikely but necessary alliances. And I feel like Democrats and progressives and liberals and people who left MAGA are maybe very unlikely alliances, but they're needed.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really important theme with this year being our 250th birthday as a nation. We're still a very young country. And I do still, Jenny, feel that we're going to get through what we're dealing with right now. There's going to be, we will be damaged as a result of it, but I do think that over time we can repair. But if we're going to make repairs, we have to do it together. And doing it together means that people of different ideologies, different walks of life, but who care about that all men and women are created equal, and that we care about the rule of law, and that no one's above the law, and that we care about our democracy, that we need to form these alliances. And I think that good news is most Democrats, liberals, and progressives I know, they're very welcoming of people who left. But for the ones out there who might be seeing this,
Some
if
aren't.
you're if you're really upset about someone supporting MAGA, I understand that. But if they've left, then it means that they're now on our side. And that side is not a side made up of existential threats. It's a side of patriots who love their country. And I think that people in MAGA, Jenny, I think that they love their country also. It's just that they're misguided in their beliefs and believe that they're patriots as well. I do believe that. I don't think that we're real Americans and they're fake Americans. That's the kind of stuff that I used to believe when I was in MAGA. We in MAGA, we're the real Americans and everybody else there are the fake Americans. No, I think people in MAGA care about their country also, but it's showing them a better way of doing politics, which is not the trauma of MAGA and feeling like we must dehumanize our political opponents and always be living in fear and rage and paranoia.
That's an excellent point. I will say that all of the people who reach out to me who've left MAGA and my friends and family who were former MAGA, we don't hate the MAGA people. Like, I personally hate the president, and I'm not a hater of people at all. But I can see both sides. Like, I've been there myself, so I have great compassion and understanding for what motivates people. And you really don't hear a lot of like hatred for people. Even some of my friends who are in Minneapolis, they don't hate the MAGA people. They don't necessarily even hate the ICE agents. They are just protecting people who are being harmed and hoping that they kind of see a better way to do things. What do you say to people who want to leave MAGA but are surrounded by family who are still deeply in it, like me? Like, very few people left the church, left MAGA, left the community with me, so I'm very much alone now. What do you say to those people? Like, how do they navigate that? How do they address that with their family? How should they be? If you're the
It's
only ex-MAGA person and it's gonna be like Easter dinner here pretty soon, and you're sitting down with all your family, or it's a Saturday birthday barbecue or whatever, what's your number one tip of advice for that?
Yeah, and I can appreciate that challenge. I remember one of the scariest parts of leaving MAGA for me was I knew that I was going to walk away from my second family. But my advice for those who are having their doubts or maybe have quietly left is be true to thyself. And if being true to thyself means walking away from MAGA, even if your friends, even if your family are in it, It's going to be hard to do it. It's going to be very scary, but on the other side of doing it, it's going to be liberating. And I promise
Mhm.
that anyone who goes through that journey, it will not be an easy journey, but it will be worth it. And they have, from our perspective as an organization, they'll also have others whom they can get to know who also left and went through a very similar journey of having to break away from MAGA friends and family, fellow parishioners. We have one lady who's entree into MAGA was Christian nationalism. We have others who were at January 6th and went to prison and rejected Trump's pardon. So we have a diverse assortment of people, and anyone out there my advice to them is be true to yourself and don't live your life for someone else the way you did in MAGA. Live it for yourself. Think
Find
of
your
it as a
source.
second take on someone's life.
Yeah, your life take two, right? The life take two is not gonna be the same. Like, I've lost my whole family, and there's some points that are really painful. My mom, who's LDS, and I am the devil now in the entire family. She's kept my dad from me for 7 years. He's almost 83 years old. I will probably never see him again in this life. So, there are certainly people who, when they're part of that community, they're gonna make your life difficult. For me, it's been about really rooting into my community around me. Yeah, I don't have a Mormon ward with 500 friends anymore, and I don't have my big mega church with 5,000 other people on Sundays, and I don't have that sense of belonging with all of my Republican neighbors and all that stuff. I don't have any of that, but I have a little courtyard full of neighbors that are kind and amazing, and my relationships with people are so much better than they've ever been before because I don't have that hatred for others. I don't have that barrier in between me and them. Looking back at who you were before you left MAGA, so maybe let's rewind to 2016, Rich, and looking at the people who are still inside it now, what do you wish they understood about the version of themselves they could become if they ever let themselves leave? And I guess I maybe should phrase this as if you personally could go back to 2016 Rich, what would you tell him about the person that he would become today?
I would tell him to read lots of different information sources to realize what is accurate and what is not accurate. And yes, there's a challenge with trying to determine what's truthful or not. It requires, Jenny, you know this, it requires great work and effort to be an accurately informed person. But I would go back to that 2016 Rich if I could go back in time, and I would tell him that what you're hearing and seeing from the Donald Trump campaign and the Republican Party does not have your best interests in mind, and it does not have the best interests of supporters in mind. It has their best interests in mind. And be careful about what you hear and think of as truth when in reality it may not be true, but it might be false. And I think that dichotomy of true and false was something that I was lacking in 2016. I was very political, but I was very, very ignorant. And I had this belief that we needed to tear the system down. And I would go back and tell that Rich that we don't tear systems down, because when we tear systems down, we're tearing ourselves down, our own families, our own livelihoods, our own country. And I would try to make that case to that Rich that instead of tearing down, let's build up.
To your point, I watched a big building in Vegas demolished one time, and it was just so quick, right? They had the wrecking balls, and I think they had some explosives, and that building came down so fast. It is so much easier to tear something down than it is to rebuild or to build
Yep.
from the ground up. That's such a profound thought. I just want to wrap this up by asking, because I know that my audience wants some hope. MAGA is terrifying a lot of us. Seeing what's going on in Minneapolis, I have a trans friend in San Diego, and Bovino was just sent back to San Diego, so he's there now doing his ICE thing in California. People are feeling a little bit hopeless. I hear that from my audience all the time. So they're going to want to know, are people leaving MAGA right now, and how many and why?
I think the tide is shifting in our favor, Jenny. I believe that there are more and more whom we realize who are quietly having doubts, maybe who have quietly quit and left.
The quiet quit. You can't measure that.
It's hard to measure. It's hard to know. I know that objectively speaking, it may be difficult for me to say that and gauge it accurately, but I'm convinced of it. And the anecdotal evidence that I would present is the fact that we have never been busier with people coming to us, wanting to share their stories,
Yes.
wanting to make amends, wanting to shed that part of their lives and start anew. Life take two for them. So for those out there who are feeling that pessimism and that hopelessness, I understand why they're feeling that way. That's what Donald Trump and his sycophants want us to feel, but we can be better than that. And love will conquer hate if we stay focused and we let our MAGA friends and family know that if there ever comes a time when they're doubting, that they can turn to us to be a friendly ear. So there are people who are leaving out there. I believe that right now the winds are shifting in our direction, and we just have to keep at it. We just have to keep talking to our MAGA friends and family and making it be known that we can be here for them as an organization. We can be here for them as their close ones, as their friends and their relatives, to let them know that when the day comes when they're having their doubts and their uncertainties about this movement and their support for Trump, that they can turn to them, because those allies are those friends and families, and we need as many allies as we can get right now in this battle.
I just want to add my testimony to that too, that I was just not very long ago, deeply religious, MAGA, white supremacist, Christian nationalist. And I had a couple of lesbian couples who, despite all that, decided to just love me and be my friend and always just be as kind as could be. And that was actually the linchpin that led me out of the Mormon church, Christianity, and everything. The kindness of these lesbian couples. And like my MAGA neighbors around me, I don't care. They get the cinnamon rolls and the cookies just like everybody else does. They get invited out to dinner. I think that this is a time, Rich, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, when we're going to fight, but we're going to fight in the voting booths. We're going to fight by reaching out to our senators and really putting the pressure on our local Congress people and our state Congress people. We're going to fight Donald Trump, but we're not going to fight the MAGA people. I think that having those arms open in love and being there to build back that community, these people have taken our tribes away. Capitalism, the divisive government, Donald Trump himself, they are corroding our natural connectedness in our villages, in our families, in our relationships. If we take that back, they can't fight us. So be loving with your MAGA people.
Yes,
That's literally what got me out. Like, if those lesbians had been mean to me and been like, Jenny, like, you're such a bitch because like you're Mormon and you're fighting Prop 8 and whatever. If they had actually just been jerks to me, I would still be in it today.
Yes, be loving, be kind, be welcoming. Remember
Confuse
that,
them.
remember the people you knew before 2016. The goodness in them is still there. We just have to show them that there's a way out of MAGA, and friends and family can be that guiding light and can create that pathway. And they can introduce them to what we're doing at Leaving MAGA as well. And we'll work to help people deconstruct and leave behind MAGA as well.
All right. And my audience needs to head over to leavingmaga.org. At least once a week, I'm over there just seeing if any new people have popped up with any new videos. There are so many stories. My story is there. I link it in my comments or in my description anytime I post a video. To me, whenever I watch everything going on in the news and just feel totally overwhelmed, it just gives me this feeling of hope. Like, oh, here's this person who was knee deep or nose deep or up to their scalp. And now here they are on the other side. They woke up. They found a better way to be more kind to other people. And it just gives me so much hope. I love Leaving MAGA. I love some of the calls that I've been on, just hearing other people's stories. And like you say, it's not just a one size fits all. everyone doesn't leave MAGA and join your group and then they're like ultra leftists.
Right.
No, there's some people who are still Republicans. There's people who are anarchists. There's people who are ultra left and moderate left, and people who just don't care anymore because they've spent their whole life thinking about their politics and their religion and they just want to live. So it's definitely a group that's very diverse and amazing, and I love it. So I would love for my audience to go over to Leaving MAGA. And if you have left MAGA or are questioning and you'd like to reach out to Rich to share your story, maybe do a little video for the Leaving MAGA platform, is there a tab on Leaving MAGA that they can reach out to you to contact?
There's a contact page and people can email me directly. And I actually do check my email at rich@leavingmaga.org.
How do we get the hat though? If somebody's
Ha-
questioning, is the merch for sale?
we've got hats and we've got shirts, and they are American made. The
Nice.
merch is only American made merch. We have a store that's actually on our website.
Okay, that's on the website too.
It's on
Awesome.
the website. The products are a little bit admittedly on the pricey side because they're made in America, but
Worth it.
we support the country and the organization, and our merch will only be US made.
Worth it. Awesome. I love that. We'll be linking some of your other stuff in my description. So if you're curious about, you've done some other podcasts, you've been featured on CNN.
Been on CNN, been on MSNBC a handful of times, lots of print media, and we're very active on our social media so everyone can
Follow
connect with.
that TikTok page. I like the TikTok page.
Yes, thank you. We're growing it ever so. Of course, we still have a long way to go to catch you, Jenny, but we're building it. We're
I'll never
slowly.
let you catch me.
Yes, I was going to say, well, that's a challenge in and of itself, but people can follow us at leavingmaga.org and all of our socials there. Also subscribe to our newsletter and also get information about our Tuesday night support groups for friends and family.
Amazing. Okay, I'll have all that in the description. Any final thoughts for us, Rich?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very inspired, Jenny, by everything that you do as well. I see all of your videos, and it brings me
Thank you.
a great, immense amount of pride to know that you are associated with our organization. And I just want to thank you for being an advocate and a proponent for all the work that we're doing.
Well, thank you. It's amazing. I'm so glad that I have you guys in my life. So I appreciate everything that you've done to build this.
Thank you.
Much needed. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I will be live streaming tomorrow night with Rich at 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, which will be Wednesday night. For those of you who are watching after, that live stream will also be posted on my page under the live tab. So if you're able to join us Wednesday night, Rich can answer some of your questions. And I appreciate your time. You're amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. And thank you everybody for watching. Mwah.
Thanks, Jenny.